In the year 500 of the Second Age, Sauron arose to become the new Dark Lord. Very soon, Gil-galad, the last High King of the Eldar, sensed the rising of this evil power, and he made alliance with Numenor. In the year 750, Galadriel and Celebrimbor of Eregion made alliance with the dwarfs of Moria. In the year 1200, at last, Sauron in disguise came to deceive the elves. He visited Lindon, but was rejected by Gil-galad and his right hand Elrond. He visited Eregion, but was rejected by Galadriel and Celeborn. But Sauron had better luck with Celebrimbor, who desired to surpass the skill of Fëanor. Sauron taught Celebrimbor and his cult great arts, and instructed them to forge the Rings of Power. The Seven Rings and the Nine Rings were directly touched by Sauron, but the Three Rings remained unsullied, because Celebrimbor forged them in secret, and Sauron had not touched them, and yet they were nonetheless partly products of his instruction, and ultimately under the control of the One Ring. In the year 1600, Sauron, in secret, forged the One Ring. He forged it in the mountain of fire, in the land of shadow, and while he wore the One Ring, he could perceive all the things that were done by means of the lesser rings, and he could see and govern the very thoughts of those that wore them. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Celebrimbor became aware of him, and afar he heard Sauron chanting these words. He and his fellows took up their rings. Celebrimbor went at first to Galadriel. They should have destroyed all the rings of power, but they failed to find the willpower in their hearts. Therefore, Galadriel advised Celebrimbor to hide the rings. Celebrimbor handed Nenya to Galadriel and sent Vilya and Narya to Gil-galad in Lindon. The three rings were named as such: Nenya the Ring of Water, Vilya the Ring of Air, and Narya the Ring of Fire. The Valar sent the Blue Wizards to ruin Sauron's influence in the east, and with them came Glorfindel, who was tasked to aid Master Elrond. Sauron's wrath was terrible when he found out that the elves have revolted against him, and after 9 decades of gathering great armies, he invaded Eriador, and the War of the Elves and Sauron began. Gil-galad sent an army under the command of Lord Elrond to Eregion. Galadriel and Celeborn joined their forces to that of Elrond's, but Sauron managed to break through and hold back the forces of Elrond and Galadriel and Celeborn. In the fall of Eregion, Celebrimbor himself fought Sauron, but he was beaten down and taken captive, and his kingdom was destroyed. Sauron found the Nine Rings in Celebrimbor's workshop. Sauron put Celebrimbor into torture and forced him to reveal the locations of the Seven Rings. But no matter how much he tried, he could not get him to give up the information about the secret locations of the three rings. Therefore, Sauron brutally killed Celebrimbor and used his body as his war banner. The forces of Moria and Lorien saved the survivors of Eregion. Elrond fled to establish the stronghold of Imladris, while Galadriel and Celeborn and their allies to Moria. They shut the gates of Durin, and Sauron could not enter. Galadriel and Celeborn went with Amrut to Lorien and fortified it against Sauron. Sauron took over the entire Eriador, except for the besieged Rivendell. Thinking he might get his hand on some rings, he assaulted the kingdom of Gil-galad. Gil-galad was desperately fighting for defense of the Grey Havens. The Númenóreans arrived in time, and together the Elves and the High Men of the Sea utterly defeated the enemies. Sauron himself barely escaped, and vowed vengeance against Númenor. Eriador was wholly free of enemies, but lay largely in ruin. Gil-galad had given Narya to Círdan, and he gave Vilya to Elrond, who was now his regent in Eriador. Meanwhile, Sauron began to give the 9 rings to mortal men and the 7 rings to the dwarf lords.